The third time the cops knocked on my door, I didn't feel fear. I felt cold, mechanical fury. I was 19, halfway through my second year in a competitive physical therapy program, and I'd already rehearsed this same explanation twice. My name is Rachel. I'm legally blind in one eye, and because of that, I walk into everything. Doorknobs, rails, walls, people. Which means I'm almost always bruised, especially on my left side. But to one girl in my program, I wasn't just clumsy. I was a victim. And she was determined to save me, whether I asked for help or not. It started with a training session in clinical skills lab. We were practicing physical assessments, wearing shorts and tank tops like usual. Our instructor was explaining how to identify signs of abuse, what to look for and what to ask. When she mentioned consistent bruising, I raised my hand. "It's important," I said, "to ask questions before you call anyone. Especially with adults." I even lifted my sleeve and showed my arm, speckled in dark splotches from brushing against door handles in the dorm halls. I laughed a little and explained, "They're all different heights. And I misjudge every single one." The professor nodded. "Exactly. You investigate. You ask. We don't jump to conclusions." It seemed like a teachable moment. Until it wasn't. A week later, the police showed up. Someone had reported me as a domestic violence victim. They cited a tip from the university. They checked my dorm, spoke to my roommate, reviewed my records. And I explained calmly that I was visually impaired and perpetually bruised because of it. They left. I thought it was over. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, a friend pulled me aside and whispered that another classmate, let's call her Kristen, had been telling people she was thinking of calling the cops on me again. "She says it's not normal. That you're still covered in marks." I was stunned. Kristen had been in that same class. She'd heard the same explanation. She knew. So I documented everything. I collected statements from classmates who'd heard her talking. And sure enough, another police visit followed. This time, I pushed back. I went to student services and said Kristen was using the authorities to harass me. I was done being polite. Done being quiet. The university finally acted. They reassigned Kristen to a different lab group, one that didn't overlap with mine. She couldn't watch me anymore. Couldn't whisper her suspicions to anyone in earshot. Kristen confronted me a day later, furious. Told me I was ruining her life. That she was just trying to help. And I remember staring at her, wondering how someone could claim to be helping while causing this much chaos. Because if she'd really cared, she would have just asked. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. After Kristen got pulled from my lab group, I thought I could finally breathe. We still had lectures together, but I avoided eye contact. I didn't even look her way. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I focused on my coursework, threw myself into clinical simulations, and even started sleeping better. Then came the third police visit. This time, it was different. The officers at the door weren't polite and curious like before. They were tense. They asked to come inside, said they'd received multiple reports of suspected abuse. Not one. Several. I froze. Multiple? I asked. Who was calling? But they wouldn't say. It's protected information. Helps keep reporters safe. All I could do was repeat the truth. I explained my visual impairment. Gave them the name of my eye doctor. Let them talk to my roommate again. They left again. But the damage was worse now. The fear crept in like a slow gas leak. Someone was watching me. Someone knew the system well enough to exploit it. When I called the university this time, I wasn't calm. I told them this was harassment, plain and simple. I demanded to know who else might be filing these reports. They claimed they couldn't give me names. But they did something else. They put it in writing that if any further false reports were made, the police would begin collecting names and pressing charges. I exhaled. Finally. That had to be the end. But it wasn't. Kristen found a loophole. She wasn't the only one calling. According to a classmate I trusted, let's call her Tasha, Kristen had told her cousin about my bruising situation, and hinted that more people were doing their duty by reporting it. Some of them weren't even students. It wasn't concern anymore. It was a campaign. And then, a week later, I got a warning. Tasha told me, eyes wide and voice hushed, that Kristen's mother was planning to drive out to my town. Not the university. My town. She was hoping to talk to me before the case got any worse. That's when the last illusion snapped. This wasn't about helping me. This was about control. What Kristen couldn't do directly, her mother was trying to finish by proxy. I stayed inside for 3 days, too paranoid to even go for groceries. I lived alone. My roommate was away on a clinical rotation. Every sound outside made my stomach tighten. And the worst part? I wasn't sure what Kristen really wanted. To ruin my life? To play hero in some delusional abuse narrative? Or was it something more twisted? Attention, maybe? Validation? That night, I had a memory. When I was 16, my neighbor's cat went missing. A girl in my math class, Brianna, posted flyers all over the school with a blurry photo of my cat, claiming it was the missing one. I told her she was wrong. That my cat had been mine for years. She laughed and said I was probably mistaken. For days, she walked around school saying she had proof I'd stolen it. She even went to the principal. Eventually, the truth came out. Her missing cat had been found 3 blocks away. But she never apologized. She just stopped talking to me. I remember how that felt, being accused of something so bizarre, so surreal, that you started questioning your own reality. This felt just like that. Except now, I wasn't 16. And Kristen wasn't just some mean classmate. She had the police on speed dial, and she was weaponizing the entire system. And still, we weren't done. Because the next phone call wasn't from the cops. It was from campus security. And they said Kristen's mom had been seen circling the parking garage. Campus security said it like it was just another line in a report. A woman was spotted in a gray Hyundai circling the upper level of Lot D, said she was looking for a student. Wouldn't give a name. We ran the plates. Kristen's mother. I froze. It was 7:48 p.m. I remember because I had just microwaved leftover stir-fry and was about to start a cram session for our anatomy practical. Instead, I stood barefoot in the middle of my kitchen holding a fork like it was a weapon. Kristen's mom had come to my campus. And she was circling, like a hawk who thought I was a wounded animal. That wasn't just creepy, it was calculated. That's when I knew this wasn't just about some girl misreading Bruises. Kristen wasn't confused. She was obsessed. And suddenly, I couldn't stop remembering another moment, one I hadn't thought about in years. When I was 10, I went to summer camp for the first time. I was awkward, shy, and already dealing with my left eye's blurred world. There was a girl there named Janelle who fixated on me. She'd follow me around, ask strange questions like, "Why don't you look at things with both eyes?" She wasn't mean. At first. Then one day, she told the counselor I'd hit her. She cried, said I'd pushed her into the lake. I hadn't even touched her. But because she cried the loudest, they believed her. I spent the rest of that summer as the girl who couldn't be trusted. It ended the same way this was starting to. Someone decided who I was, and no one bothered to check the facts. Back in the present, I called Tasha. She confirmed everything. Kristen had been venting to her cousin, who passed it along to Kristen's mom. She said something like, "If the school won't deal with it, I will." I wasn't even sure what it was anymore. The next day, Lily, another classmate I barely knew, pulled me aside. She was shaking. Said she'd heard Kristen bragging in the cafeteria about having inside info on where I lived. She laughed when someone asked how. "It's not stalking if it's public info." That was a lie. My apartment wasn't listed. Only one person had been there, Lily, for a group project. And then I got the worst message yet. A police officer called to inform me that more abuse reports had come in. Not one, Multiple. Some were made anonymously, but others were linked to family members of a student at the university. Kristen had roped in outsiders. Her obsession had metastasized into a network of enablers. I felt like a character in someone else's drama. Like I'd been miscast as a victim in a story I didn't agree to. But this time, the officer said something different. We're no longer treating this as standard procedure. Anyone who calls again will have their name recorded. If they continue after being informed, they'll face harassment charges. For the first time in months, I felt a shift. The game had changed. And then it happened. 4 days later, Kristen's mom called again. But she used a fake name. What she didn't know. Police trace phone numbers now. Her voice was recorded. And that single call was all it took. Kristen's mother was hit with misuse of emergency services. Kristen herself was now under formal investigation for harassment. I wasn't the problem anymore, I was evidence. But that wasn't the end. Because that night, Lily called me, whispering. She's still trying to find out where you live. Lily's voice was barely audible through the phone, but her words pierced like a siren. Rachel, she's asking people. Kristen's mom. Where your house is. She wants to show up. She told me and she just needs 10 minutes with you. Said she'd fix everything if she could just explain. Explain? Explain what? That her daughter weaponized the legal system? That she manipulated half the class into thinking I was hiding bruises from some mystery abuser? That she'd built a fantasy so elaborate she couldn't untangle herself from it? By then, I wasn't even scared, I was tired. But I knew I had to act. Lily and I devised a plan. I deleted every trace of our texts from her phone, backed up our messages to cloud storage, then told her to report the situation to the university, with screenshots, names, everything. She did it that same afternoon. The university took it seriously. They printed her statements, turned them over to campus security, and flagged Kristen's mom's car at every major entrance. I was moved to a clinic placement far from campus. Kristen didn't know which hospital I'd be assigned to, and since she'd been expelled before placements began, she'd never see the location list. No schedule. No address. No way to find me. But still, I didn't sleep. Because there was always a gap. One forgotten detail. One cracked window in a locked room. Kristen knew the town I lived in. Her cousin and Lily's cousin were vaguely connected through some wedding years ago. And that thread was enough for Kristen's mom to pull on. Lily messaged me again that night. She's driving around. In your town. Looking. I locked all my doors. Moved furniture in front of the front window. Sat in the dark, silently counting the cars that passed by. My campus issued a temporary security watch. I was told to park near the cameras. My clinical supervisor was informed. Pictures of Kristen's mom were distributed to the hospital's reception. If she showed up, she'd be banned. It was surreal. I was a nursing student. I was supposed to be doing blood draws, measuring vitals, prepping for final exams. Instead, I was dodging the mother of a woman who tried to rewrite my life into a battered woman narrative because she couldn't believe Bruises had a non-violent cause. But the scariest moment came a few nights later, when I saw it with my own eyes. A gray Hyundai pulled slowly down my street. I watched from behind the curtains, heart rattling like a loose drawer. The car paused at the curb. Lights off. Engine still humming. Then it moved on. The next morning, Lily confirmed it. She went out last night. Said she saw your street. That she felt close. Close. Kristen's mom was hunting me like I was prey. Then something broke. Not in me, but in the narrative. Because someone else finally came forward. A classmate named Ava. She went to the university and told them Kristen had asked her to file a false report. Had even offered to type it for her. To make it easier. Ava refused. But Kristen had already told others that Ava had filed it. That's when the police took it seriously. Within 48 hours, Kristen was officially charged with harassment and misuse of emergency services. Her mom? Added to the case under aiding and abetting. And just like that, I wasn't the target anymore. I was a witness. The police now told me I might have to testify. That, depending on how things went, I could be called in during the next semester. But here's the strangest part. I hadn't seen Kristen since. Not in person. Not online. She disappeared. And for a moment I thought maybe the story was over. I was wrong. Because 3 weeks before final exams, my building's security officer pulled me aside. He had something to show me on the footage. The security officer didn't say much. Just, "You'll want to see this." He walked me into the narrow room behind the admin desk, clicked a few keys on an old desktop, and pulled up grainy footage from 2 nights earlier. At 2:14 a.m., a woman in a hoodie crept through the parking lot of my clinic building. She didn't approach the entrance. Didn't try any doors. Instead, she circled the far edge of the lot, paused under a light pole, and stared up at the camera. Then she held something up. A piece of paper. The resolution was too poor to read it, but the officer zoomed in on the bottom corner, a signature. Kristen's mom. And scrawled across the top in black sharp, "We just wanted to help." That was it. No vandalism. No attempted entry. Just a statement. They weren't trying to fix anything. They were trying to scare me. And it worked. The next morning, I filed for a formal protection order, not just against Kristen, but against her mother too. The university backed it immediately. My clinical site doubled security. My address was flagged in local law enforcement systems. I was, officially, a protected party in an active harassment case. But Kristen? Still missing. No social media activity. No sightings. No messages. Then, a week before finals, I received an envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just slid under my clinic's staff room door. Inside was a note in looping handwriting. "You ruined her life. You don't even know the full story. She was just trying to protect you. From yourself." And tucked behind it, a printed screenshot of me during our abuse lecture, lifting my sleeve, smiling as I explained my bruises. A still frame of me, weaponized. I didn't cry this time. I took the envelope straight to the dean's office. They didn't hesitate. Within 48 hours, campus security confirmed the footage showed Kristen herself, tailing someone into the building using an alumni ID that hadn't yet been deactivated. That's how she'd gotten the envelope inside. That same afternoon, she was arrested. Not by campus security. By real police. It turns out, Kristen hadn't just called the police repeatedly, she'd used a burner phone to do it. Each call logged from a different location. She'd even coached another student to file anonymously through a local hotline. And her own therapist? Had cut ties with her 3 weeks prior and reported her for unethical behavior after she admitted to testing systems for patient protection readiness. She hadn't been confused. She had been conducting an experiment. Trying to prove how easy it was to manipulate institutions under the guise of concern. I wasn't her classmate. I was her case study. The bruises, the disability, the silence, I'd been the perfect specimen. But it backfired. She didn't get praise. She didn't get credit. She got expelled, charged, and barred from reapplying to any state medical program for 5 years. And the final twist? Her mom was never trying to protect her. Lily told me later, Kristen's mom had been trying to control the fallout. She'd known what Kristen was doing. She just didn't want her daughter to be caught. Now they were both being sued by the state for obstruction and harassment. I passed my finals. With honors. Graduated 2 months later. I walked across the stage with my head high, not because I wasn't bruised, but because I wasn't broken. My name was read loud. And in the audience? Lily, beaming like a proud sister. Not once did I glance at the empty seats I'd reserved for my family. I didn't need anyone's validation. Because in the end, I learned something Kristen never could. Helping someone starts with asking. And real protection doesn't require a police report.